start the session now. Um, Hello and very good evening, everyone. Hope you all are staying safe and healthy. I am Aanchal Dua, Senior Consultant with EBC Learning. On behalf of EBC Learning, I welcome you all to this workshop on intellectual property cases in the last decade. We at EBC Learning offers academic and skill-based training, and this webinar is part of our series of webinars which we have been organizing very frequently. And today we have with us Mr. Nikhil Chawla, who will be our guest speaker for this session. Great to have you here, Mr. Nikhil, and welcome to EBC Learning. Also, as a panelist, we have with us today editor EBC Learning, Professor Padyaman Purohit. He will give us a quick overview of our learning portal, what all courses do we offer, and how we can help you in enriching your legal education. Over to you, Pradyuman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aanchal, for the introduction. Welcome, Nikhil. So, hello everyone, all the panelists and the attendees of the talk. I'm going to briefly introduce all of you to our portal, which is ebclearning.com. EBC Learning has been there for quite some time now, and we offer a lot of courses which are academic courses, skill-based courses, and the courses that are related, courses that are related for your academic growth. Also, you will find courses which are relevant for developing various skills in your life. So I'll share my screen and then you can sort of look at our portal. So this is EBC Learning. You can see we have courses on contract law, how to create a will. There's also interesting program on mastering legal writing. The last date for which is of enrollment is 30th of June, and it's and we don't have courses which are only in the video format. We also have live courses which are instructor-led courses, and most of the courses that we have designed here is our self-paced courses. That means you can enroll into them and then watch it at your leisure and then try to complete it as you can. And as of now, our portal is there. There's a paid version, and also you can enter and explore all these courses which are present, various talks that are present here through a free trial that we provide. So if you log into ebclearning.com, you'll land up on this page. And here you either sign in or you subscribe or you go for, you start your free trial, and you can explore all our courses, and for a very bare minimum cost, and free trial is obviously free. So, I expect that most of you would at least go and look at our portal and explore our courses. And we are looking for some feedback on these courses, and asking everyone to tell us how we can make these courses better. At the same time, I wish and I hope that all of these courses will help all of you, not only the student, but also practitioners. It will also help the practitioners to develop or hone their skills, or sometimes go back to your own basics and see that whether there are some gaps in your understanding and knowledge. So these courses are very extensive, rigorous, and I hope that this effort of ours would able to serve you both intellectually, professionally, and academically as well. Right. Over to you, Dr. Aanchal, and so that Dr. Nikhil can start his talk.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Professor Pradyuman, for a great insight. And yes, there is a lot to experience at EBC Learning, as Professor Pradyuman has explained. We do offer library of on-demand self-paced courses and instructor-led courses, so do check them out. So let me introduce our speaker to you all. Mr. Nikhil Chawla is a patent attorney, patent agent, patent attorney, and a former engineer with years of experience in IP enforcement, prosecution, data protection, and privacy. He represents Fortune 500 and mid-sized companies, as well as emerging startups and entrepreneurs. Mr. Chawla's practice largely involves intellectual property litigation, particularly in patent and trademark, as well as other business litigation and transactional matters. He is registered to practice before India and New York as a patent attorney and is an experienced litigator in all phases of IP and business litigation. He has achieved significant judgments and outcomes in and out of the court for both his litigation clients in the field of patent litigation, trademark, and privacy dispute. Mr. Chawla also specializes in internet and domain name disputes and has successfully obtained preliminary injunctions against cyber squatters. Mr. Chawla is also active in rendering patent and trademark validity and infringement opinions in a wide range of technical disciplines. He has argued and prepared motions and briefs in proceedings before the courts and Indian Patent Office. Great work, Mr. Nikhil, and I'm sure our audience is eager to hear from you. Also, I would like to inform you all there will be a Q&A session at the end of each case discussion. We have kept it more interactive for you all. There will be an interesting poll. You can write your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and directly put your queries or questions across our speaker. Without any further delay, I would hand it over to our speaker. Over to you, Mr. Nikhil. EBC platform is all yours now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshul. I couldn't have asked for a better introduction. Good evening to all ladies and gentlemen who have joined us today. Now, today, we have a very interesting session lined up for you. Today, I'll be talking about a few of the IP cases which have shaped the jurisprudence in India. I'll also be talking about some of the IP cases which are currently going on and which has potential to shape the jurisprudence. So welcome to EBC's Learning Intellectual Property webinar. Now, without further ado, I'd like to start, do a deep dive straight into the first case. So we have the first case, we have Toyota versus Prius Auto. Now, why I chose this case was the fact that this was the first time the Supreme Court actually expounded on the theory of transporter reputation. Now, the transporter reputation was first, concept came actually in the Supreme Court in the N. Dogra versus Whirlpool Corporation case. But in this case, Toyota versus Prius, the Supreme Court actually did a deep dive and went into what all ingredients are required for transporter reputation. So what does transporter reputation actually mean? Transporter reputation, actually, what the word connotes, it means the same. It means that reputation cannot be confined to a geographical area. So just to give you an example, if I'm selling a product, if I'm not selling a product in India, but I have quite a reputation outside India in a country like US, can I bank upon my reputation in the US and use it in my passing of action in India? So to answer this query, the Supreme Court in this case went into what all can transporter reputation really be incorporated in India? Do Indian legal system actually recognizes transporter reputation? And if yes, what all goes into it and what all a plaintiff needs to show? Okay, so now we have the facts of the case. So Toyota is a Japanese company and it came out with this model Prius. Now, Prius, as you might have known, it was the first electric petrol vehicle which came out in the market. Now, Toyota, being a Japanese company, actually was selling its products in jurisdictions like US, in the UK, in Japan. However, they're not selling their cars in India. So naturally, Toyota only filed trademark applications in countries like Japan, in the UK, and Australia. So this was, I think, they launched the vehicle in 1997, and subsequently, this Indian company, Prius Auto Industries, in the year 2002, they came out with their own automobile products, and they filed applications for the word Prius, and they actually got in 2002. So now when Toyota got knowledge of the fact that Prius Auto Industries is using their marks, Toyota decided to file a suit for passing off in India. Now, before we go into deeper, let's recap and let's talk about passing off and infringement. Why was it that Toyota couldn't really file a suit for infringement? And the reason is this, that Toyota didn't really had any trademark applications in India. So it was relying upon its goodwill and reputation and the fact that it was the prior user in its suit against Prius for passing off. Now, what all passing off mean? What are ingredients does a plaintiff have to show in a passing off action? So plaintiff has to show three primarily things. One, it has to show reputation. Second, it has to show misrepresentation. In this part of the ingredient, you have to show that there's likelihood of confusion. And the third aspect is the damage to goodwill. You have to show that because the defendant is selling the same product, you're losing somehow on goodwill or you're losing out on profits. So we'll be concentrating on the first aspect, the reputation aspect. Now, let's look at what arguments were made by Toyota in this case. So Toyota basically said that even though we're not selling any good or cars in India, we have a recognition and reputation outside India. The second aspect of the second argument taken by Toyota was that we have spent considerable amount of money on advertisement and promotion in India to establish reputation and goodwill. They also harped on the fact that in certain leading newspapers, they came out with advertisement where they were basically promoting their cars. They also said that it's not necessary that each and every member of the public has to know about the car or the word Prius. Even if certain people in the auto industry are aware of the mark Prius, that should also be sufficient. They also said that despite the fact that defendant had already filed and got a registered trademark for Prius, that is moot because they were the prior user and this was a suit for passing off. Now let's look at what arguments were made by the defendant. Now the defendant gave a very straight short answer. They said, we are the registered users. In 2001, we filed for an application for the word Prius and we got that trademark registration. They also said that before 2001, Toyota or the mark Prius didn't really have any reputation or goodwill prior to 2001, which is when they got their mark registration. Hence, they said that that even though Toyota wasn't really in the market, they didn't have any goodwill or reputation to bank upon. So let's look at what happened before the Supreme Court. This matter was actually, before going to Supreme Court, it was first legislated in the Delhi High Court. The learned single judge of the Delhi High Court on the very first day passed an ex parte interim injunction order. It went with whatever the Toyota arguments were made, it went with that. It felt like Toyota, even though for a passing of action, established all the ingredients and hence they're entitled to it, and hence they passed an order injuncting Prius from using the word trademark Prius for automobile parts. When the matter came before the division bench disagreed with the single bench order and set aside. They said that in this matter, territorial principle has to take into consideration. You have to consider the goodwill and reputation within India, and you can't really bank upon reputation and goodwill outside India. So two issues were before the Supreme Court. The first issue was whether Prius was guilty of any of the products, or was guilty of passing off under the trademark Prius. The second issue was, in case of trademark, whether you have to look at the territorial principle or you have to look at universality doctrine. So universality doctrine is the transporter reputation. So the Supreme Court came out with a verdict, and I like to ask the audience what you think was the verdict in this matter. So can I ask Pradyuman to share the polls? So I'll request everybody to look at these four options and see which way did the Supreme Court went. Okay, I'll ask Pradyuman to stop sharing now. Can we have the results of the poll?
Actually, no one voted.
Okay, all right. So okay, so looking at the four options, I can tell you how the Supreme Court went. So the first option is Supreme Court said transporter reputation not allowed. The second option is Prius has a registered trademark, hence Prius should be allowed to use it. The third option was transporter reputation allowed, but courts will have to determine if there has been a spillover of the reputation and goodwill of the mark. So the Supreme Court actually went with option C. Supreme Court said that you can rely upon transporter reputation. You can rely upon your goodwill and reputation outside India. But you have to show that there has been a spillover of the reputation and goodwill of the mark. So having said that, Supreme Court said that Toyota, even though had substantial goodwill outside India, they weren't able to present sufficient evidence to show that the word Prius had reputation in the Indian market. So all those evidence which they presented, like advertisements and money spent on marketing, was not really sufficient for people to associate or the word Prius with Toyota. So the Supreme Court, in a nutshell, they said transported reputation is allowed, but you have to present sufficient evidence to show that there has been a spillover of the reputation and goodwill of the mark within the jurisdiction where you are asserting. Okay, so now we'll do a deep dive into a second case. It's the Horlicks versus Heinz. Now, the reason why I chose this case is because this case deals with comparative advertisement. Now, we've all come across, comparative advertisement one way or the other. We've all seen the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi, ads trying to show that their product is much more superior in quality and etc. So what did this case deal with? So the plaintiff in this case was Horlicks. They have the product called Horlicks dietary supplements, not dietary supplements, it's the food supplements. We also had defendant who had their products Complan. We've all seen these products or had these products while growing up. So Heinz, defendant in this case, they came out with a comparative advertisement where they said that 1 cup of Complan has the same amount of proteins as 2 cups of Horlicks. Seeing this advertisement, the plaintiff, being aggrieved, decided to sue for trademark infringement before the Delhi High Court. Now, what were the arguments made by the plaintiff in this case? Well, the plaintiff basically said that one, they've used my trademark and this is an infringement. Second argument which the plaintiff made was the fact that this is a misrepresentation. Like the fact that they're insinuating that 1 cup of Complan is equivalent to twice the amount of proteins in Horlicks. So Horlicks said this is a complete case of misrepresentation. The third argument which the plaintiff made was the fact they said that the right to freedom of expression guaranteed under Article 19(1)(a), it's only available to citizens and it's not corporate entities like defendant. They also relied upon this very famous case, Puttaswamy versus Union of India, which is a beautiful case. If you have time, you should check it out. They also relied upon that case to say that the right to control my entity rests with me. And defendants shouldn't have made that in false insinuation in that comparative advertisement. Now let's look at what arguments were made by the defendant. Well, the defendant basically said that this is a case which is permitted under Section 30 of the Trademarks Act. Now, what does Section 30 say? Section 30 of the Trademark Act says that you can use somebody else's registered trademark, provided that it is not to take unfair advantage or detrimental to the distinctive character or repute of the trademark. Well, they basically said that we are not trying to defame the other side. We are just stating the truth. And they also said that this is not, defamatory statement. This is accurate, true, and they actually presented evidence which said that the Complan actually had twice number of protein as compared to Horlicks. So, and they also relied upon this argument that trade puffery should be allowed. That why, if I'm using somebody else's trademark, to make exaggeration of claims in my advertisement to attract clients, why I shouldn't be allowed to do that. So when this matter was decided by the Delhi High Court, so these are the 4 options which the judge could have gone through. I'm just going to get the poll outside just in case somebody wants to try it out. So Pradyuman, can we have the polls now for this case? I'll request everybody to just give it a shot. This is not like an exam where you have to get it right. Right now we're just trying to see what possible way you think the judge would have gone into, and then I'll be talking about what was the right answer and why. I'll encourage other people to also vote.
We have got 2 responses. There are 38 people, so I think at least we can wait for.
We're definitely getting there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll wait for another 15 seconds and then we can close the poll. Okay. So yeah, you can close the poll now. So the 4 options in front of you are A, the advertisement was infringing the plaintiff's mark as use of anyone's trademark without their permission causing loss of reputation and goodwill will amount to infringement. So, and the second option was that advertisements are a facet of commercial speech that's protected by Article 19(1)(a), and the same can only be restricted in accordance with 19(2). The third was advertisements, a form of comparative advertisement, and did not violate the plaintiff's trademark as it did not distort competition or mislead the consumer. The fourth option was B plus C. So the correct answer here is D. We see one person has actually answered correctly. So the judge basically said that one, this is protected under Section 30 of the Act. You're using somebody else's registered trademark, but that did not lead to any loss of reputation or damage to Horlicks in this case, and the plaintiff in this case. The second thing which the judge said was this is protected under your freedom of speech and expression, which is guaranteed under Article 19(1)(a). And nobody can stop you from, nobody can gag you or using your other trade or using somebody else's registered trademark, provided, it is very important here, that you are not damaging the reputation or goodwill of somebody else's registered trademark. Okay, so let's go into the third case now. So we have the Shreya Singhal versus the Union of India. This is, I believe, one of the most important cases in, dealing with modern internet laws. So before we go into issue spotting of this case, just want to recap a little bit and talk about the backdrop of this case. So in India, we don't have data protection or privacy laws other than the IT Act, which came out in 2000. The IT Act is the Information Technology Act, and it basically regulates electronic communications. It also regulates electronic, sales in electronic websites, e-commerce websites. It also regulates what intermediaries has to, comply with, what all, if you're a social media intermediary, what are obligations you have. So when the IT Act came into the picture, there was Section 66A, which said that anybody, this was a criminal offense. If you send through a computer resource or communication device, any information that is grossly offensive or with the knowledge of its falsity, the information is transmitted for the purposes of causing annoyance, inconvenience, danger, insult, injury, hatred, or ill will, you can be criminally liable. So just to, ruminate over the section, this section basically says that if you post something on internet, and if the government feels that it is, it can cause annoyance, inconvenience, danger, insult, injury, or hatred, or ill will, you can be criminally liable. Okay, so now let's do a deep dive into the facts of this case. So what happened was, in the year, I think it was 2015, 2016, sorry, 2012 actually. So two girls had posted something on Facebook during the Bandh in Mumbai after the death of Bal Thackeray, Shiv Sena chief Bal Thackeray. So what happened pursuant to that? The police got hold of these two girls and imprisoned them. They were ultimately let go, but this led to the filing of an application with the Supreme Court, challenging two things: challenging the constitutionality, validity of Section 66, as well as Section 79. We'll come to that later on. Okay, so sorry. Right. So the first issue was whether Section 66 of the A, violates the right to freedom of speech and expression. So what were the arguments made by the government? The government basically said that you have Article 19(1), which is the freedom of expression and speech. But you have in Article 19(2) certain reasonable restrictions which can be put on your freedom of speech and expression. Now, what does this contain? The government says that we can come out with law which which you can make criminally liable if you are saying something defamatory, if you are saying something against the decency or morality, or something against public order, or something in contempt of court. Then even then your freedom of speech and expression is not absolute. You can be criminally liable if it falls under these 5 or 6 umbrella brackets. They also said that even though it's loose language, it's not really a ground of invalidity. So let's come at what the arguments were made for the plaintiff. The plaintiff basically said that this is quite a broad, when you look at Section 66A, it's such a broad, there's certain aspects which might be covered under 19(2), but there's certain aspects which might not be covered under 19(2). they say that this has the effect of chilling. It's so arbitrary, and it's the government can put you behind bars even if they find it's ill will or if they find it's inconvenience. So you can't have like such a blanket statute, according to the whims and fancies of the government. Okay, so now, so let's go with the. So we had the four options again here. The Supreme Court went one. So let's have a poll again, and you can read the options. Take your time. I'll request everyone to, just if they don't know what the answer is, just to guess. Okay, another 15 seconds and then we close the polls. Pradhuban, you can close the polls now. Okay, so this is quite a vast improvement from the earlier polls. We've seen 18 people vote this time around. Okay, so the four options were A, the court invalidated Section 66 of the ITA Act in its entirety, as it said it violates Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution of India. The second option was court said the provision is covered under Section 19(2) and there were reasonable restrictions which can be put upon Section 66A. The third option was A plus D, and the fourth option was the court held just because the provision fails to define terms such as inconvenience or annoyance, a very large amount of protected and curtailed speech, innocent speech could be curtailed. So the correct answer was D in this case. I can imagine why a lot of people actually went for A. A is also right, but the D aspect is also there. So what the court basically said that Section 66A encompasses much more facets, which is there in Section 19(2), Article 19(2). So even though Article 19(2) talks about defamation against morality, incitement, but your Section 66 contains such vague terms like inconvenience and ill will, so which goes beyond the scope of Article 19(2). So the correct answer is A plus D in this case. But the reason why I chose this case and why it's such a pivotal case in your modern internet laws era is because, Section 79 also came into the picture. So the IT Act, as I told you before, IT Act also encompasses certain regulations which social intermediaries have to do. So certain obligations are put forward that social intermediaries have to, for instance, exercise due diligence. Second, if they come across any illegality of content on their social media platforms, they have to remove it. So when Section 79(3) at that point of time, the rules which came out along with the act, they basically said that the obligation on social media intermediaries is one, that if they come across any knowledge of illegal content, either on its own, second, either by notification by the government, or by any user of such platform. So if in any of these three people reached out to them saying that there's certain illegal content on your platforms, they had to go into that and decipher whether it's illegal or not, and to remove such content. So now in this case, the legality of Section 79 also was put into question. But and what the verdict was this. The Supreme Court basically said that you have to, tone down the reading of this section. So initially the obligation was if somebody, you have to do your due diligence, you have to see if any illegal content is there on your own, or by the government, or if you know the fact that since a lot of these social media intermediaries will get a lot of messages from users, it's practically infeasible. So what they said was only if the government notifies you, or if the court tells you to remove such illegal content, only then you're obligated to remove such content. So, or also if you come across some illegal content on your own. So now if certain user had any problem with illegal content, so if you go on Facebook and you see certain illegal content or something which is defamatory, you had to go to government or you had to file a case in this case. Now that was the verdict in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. But let me tell you guys, this position has changed now. So in the IT rules which came out in the year this year, in fact, so now the IT rules mandate that every social media intermediary will have a grievance officer, and any user who has any personal grievance with any content being placed on social media intermediaries platforms, you can directly reach out to them. So now if you have any problem on any content on Facebook or Google, you can directly reach out to them and ask them to take those content down. And all these social media intermediaries will have to take cognizance of your grievance. Okay, so now let's go into the fourth case. So this is a very interesting case. This was again this year. And let me remind you, this is something which is still pending before the Bombay High Court. The reason why I chose this case is because it's a very interesting case, and it's interesting to see how the Bombay High Court will look into this case. So this involves a case of copyright infringement. The plaintiff in this case was a script holder. Like, he wrote a script, and subsequently he came across this Netflix show Betal. I'm sure most of you might have seen it or heard about it. I'm not a big fan, but it was a very interesting show. So the plaintiff said that he had written that script, and Netflix show Betal, they kind of copied his script and made a show. So he filed a suit for infringement of copyright before the Bombay High Court. Now, in a suit for copyright infringement, there are three things which you have to show. Well, one is ownership. You have to show that you are the owner of a copyright. So in fact, for him, he has to show that he was the one who wrote that literary work, and he has to present sufficient evidence for that. The second thing in a copyright infringement case you have to show is copying. You have to show that the other side has copied your work. Now, how you can show that that the other side has copied your work? You can present evidence by showing that your work was out in the public, and the other side had access to it. So that there's a likelihood of him copying your work. So in this case, what he did was, the plaintiff said that he had made this script, he had written the script, and he had sent it to different producers at Netflix office. So there's very likelihood of chance that they might have come across, have had access to such a script, and might have copied it from there. The third and the most crucial aspect of a copyright infringement case is you have to show that the work is substantially similar. Now, this is where it becomes interesting. So when it comes to copyright cases, and especially copyright of characters and, movies, the law hasn't been, well defined in India as of now, as opposed to other jurisdictions. So in this case, what the plaintiff said was there was 13 similarities between his work and the Betal, the Netflix show. He said there were copies of characters, there was copied of locations, there was props. He said the manner was different, but the projection was very similar. Okay, so now let's look at what the court actually said. The Bombay High Court refused to give an ad interim injunction. And the reason was such, when the Bombay High Court said, on the second aspect of copying, even though the plaintiff might have sent the script to Netflix office, there's not much likelihood prima facie case of copying here. It doesn't really insinuate that the defendant had copied one way or the other. Second, when it comes to substantial copying or substantial similarity, the court wasn't really convinced. The court really felt that, what the person was claiming copyright was actually stock. It wasn't sufficiently delineated. So for somebody to claim copyright over character, it can't be a stock character. You can't just come up with a zombie and say that I own a copyright over zombie. So anybody who uses zombie in their film or in their series has to take a license from you, or is breaching or infringing my copyright. I mean, there has to be certain, the character has to be very well delineated. The expression has to be very well defined. It can't be a stock character. So it'll be interesting to see how the Bombay High Court, tackles this issue. What sort of test of copyright will they apply in this case? So people who are interested in copyright infringement, copyright cases, this is a must watch for them. Okay, coming to the next case law, we have ITC, Britannia versus ITC. Sorry. So this is again something which is still pending before the Delhi High Court. And I found this interesting because you come across these cases a lot, and to know what goes behind a trademark infringement case, or particularly a case where somebody is alleging copying of, the packaging and the get of the product. So I think this is something which is very interesting. The law has been very well defined in this aspect. But what really intrigued me in this case was the fact that this has been a very contentious issue between these two companies. And the judgment was very well, beautifully written by Justice Hari Shankar. So in this case, what happened was the Britannia had NutriChoice biscuits as their product, and they were in the market much prior to the defendants, which is the ITC in this case. The ITC came out with their own digestive biscuits subsequently. The plaintiff in this case alleged that the defendants had copied their packaging. The plaintiff also said that we have a trademark registration in packaging. And the only reason why the defendants have copied our packaging is to harp on our goodwill and reputation. They also said that this packaging will result in deception and confusion, and hence they filed a suit seeking interim injunction, seeking injunction, restraining the defendants from manufacturing. Okay, so now you've all seen the products, right? Like let's look. Whenever a case like this comes before the court has to see whether the packaging is substantially similar or not. So in this, what does the court go into? The court go into what is the color, what is the font being used, where is the positioning of the trademark, is it the same size, the same font? So you can see similarities, right? You can see the yellow being used overall. You can see the blue being used here. You can see the picture of the biscuits on one side. You can see the trademark, over on the left side. So the court really goes into, okay, what are the similarities? What are the dissimilarities? Whether the products are being sold in same channels, whether there's a likelihood of confusion with respect to a consumer. Will a consumer looking at both these products be confused as to which product, is from which company? So all this analysis is done by a court. So right now, the Delhi High Court came out with an interim order in this case. So let's look at the four options which you have. Pradyuman, I'll request you to come out with the polls. So looking at both these products, I'll now request all the viewers to see what can be the verdict by the court. Or maybe better, how will you, being a judge, looking at these two products, think whether it's an infringement case or not? Okay. Pradyuman, I'll ask you to close the polls now, or maybe another 5-10 seconds. Okay. So it's very interesting to see how people voted in this one. So many people felt that, it's the packaging of defendants' biscuits is prima facie deceptively similar to that of plaintiff's biscuit. But quite funny enough, the judge felt it was the opposite. The judge said that even though there are similarities, I don't think that a consumer will get confused between these two products. So this is again, very issue, like every case has its own different facts. And every time a judge can lean one way or the other, right? Because right now we did a test right now, many people felt that they were very substantially similar. But, the court actually went the other way. Sorry, just give me one second. Right. So the court basically said, for an average mind, when you look at these products at a very close level, you only look at the similarities. But when you look at these two products at a shelf, you will also look at other things. You look at, probably you look at the dissimilarities, like, the word mark being such a big font. I mean, people might not even get confused. So the threshold has actually been, brought much higher with this case law. So you don't have to nitpick and see only like what are the similarities. You also have to consider the dissimilarities, and you have to balance that out. So again, I think that this can go one way or the other. We saw it right now that it went, you felt that it was deceptively similar, but the correct answer in this case was D. Okay, so now we come to the last two case laws, and I've chosen these two case laws to be a standard essential patent case law. Now, so standard essential patent case laws, is something which is very highly contested in India right now. So people, all students, who are thinking about venturing into IP, I mean, it's become quite mandated that you should be aware of SEP litigation, which is happening right now. So SEP litigation in general is quite convoluted, but I'll try to simplify it. You might need a series of webinars to go over each and every aspect of SEP litigation, but I'm going to try and simplify it down. And it's really important that people should be aware, because we've seen a lot of companies coming to India and litigating SEP litigations in India. Over the last few years, we've seen many case laws and many law firms now, being involved in SEP litigation one way or the other. So let's do deep dive into what is SEP litigation. So an SEP litigation, and let's also talk about how it's different from a patent litigation. So in SEP litigation, let's start with standards. Okay, so we have standards. Just to give an example, when you have a railway, right, you have a broad gauge, you have a meter gauge, you have a standard gauge. So every state in India might have a different version of what the railway. There might be like 1.7 meters difference between the two rails, or it might be 1.9 meters difference between the two rails. So what you can imagine what the conflict is, right? You might not have the one railway having the same range in each and every state of India. So what one does is you have a standard. You say that, okay, we're going to have one specified range in India. One, the difference, the size between the two rails will be 1.5, for instance. So instead of have states incorporating different sizes, let's just come out with one common standard where every railway will be running on that. Just to give you another example of a standard, you have, for instance, in every country, you have your own telecommunications standard. So you have a different way of communicating on phones, right? For instance, at one point in time, we had CDMA. So if you had to call somebody, you could only call somebody else if you're using the same CDMA. For instance, in the US, you had like a different standard for 2G, or in UK, you had a different standard for 3G. So there was a need for a uniformity. There was a need that every country has one common standard, so that somebody in India can call somebody in the US. It shouldn't be the case that I cannot call somebody in the US because they use a different standard and I use something else. So we have standardization bodies which come out with standards. So common examples are the 2G standard, the 3G standard, the 4G standard, and the 5G standard now, which has become much more famous after the Juhi Chawla's petition. This is related to telecommunication. We also have standards for DVDs. We have standards for audio. We have standards for various other technology sectors. So whenever there's a standard and you have a patent, and your patent gets mapped onto a standard. So if suppose I have a standard, it's about how two people can talk via phones, and it gets incorporated in the 3G standard. Then anybody who's using those devices and who is compliant with the 3G standard is necessarily implementing my patent. So it is a little complex. I'm sure you are with me on this. I mean, if my patent gets incorporated to a standard, everybody else has to be mandatorily implementing my patent. So that's how it becomes a standard essential patent litigation. And how does it differ from a patent litigation is, in a patent litigation, you have to show direct evidence. You have to show that my patent has been incorporated in your device or a process. But when it comes to a standard essential patent litigation, all you have to do is show that your patent gets mapped onto a standard. You'll show that, okay, all your claims of a patent is being mapped onto a 2G standard or a 3G standard, and that the defendants are using those standards. So let's talk about this case now. So The reason why I chose this case out of all the SCP cases was that we've actually got now a first judgment on standard essential patent litigation. So this is very important because this is for the first judgment which ever came across. There are series of litigations which are happening right now, which are pending for the Delhi High Court and the Supreme Court. But this was the first judgment which came out on SCP litigation. So it's really important because this has kind of set the backdrop, and it is a beacon for other cases which are going to follow in suit. So what was the finding in this case? The first finding was on essentiality. So essentiality is basically you have to show that your patent is mapped onto a standard. So the court didn't really go into the exercise of essentiality, but they kind of recognized that, okay, essentiality can be done to prove infringement. The second aspect of this case with regard to infringement was two things. The court, so basically in the plaintiff in this case, they showed infringement by doing a direct mapping of independent claims with the product, and they also relied upon claim charts to show that this is a standard essential patent litigation, and the defendants are mandatorily using such standards. So the court didn't really go into the exercise of infringement because there wasn't really counter by the defendant in this case. So the court did recognize that you can show infringement by essentiality, which is by showing that your patent gets mapped onto a standard. The third aspect is the FRAND aspect. Now, in SCP litigation, once you're able to show essentiality, infringement, validity, you have to now come to damages. What rate will the defendant pay the plaintiff? So in this case, in determination of FRAND, it's a very detailed exercise, and we'll be talking more about it in the next case. But in this case, the court really felt that the plaintiff, Philips, had come up with many licenses in support of its FRAND commitment. And FRAND is basically a pseudonym of fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. So in issues on the plaintiff to show that, what rates you've offered the defendant are actually fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. And in support of this, the plaintiff usually files, comparable license agreements and say that, the other licenses are giving me this amount of money. So hence the defendant should also be giving me this amount of money, this amount of royalty or other. So in this case, the court really went into, in terms of FRAND, the court basically said that the rates which the plaintiff offered were FRAND, and as there was no counter to the FRAND contention by the defendant. So coming to our last case, we have the Interdigital versus Xiaomi case. I think we've exceeded the time limit also, so I'm going to keep this very short. So this was a case, it's pending before the Delhi High Court right now, and this issue pending before the Supreme Court. So this is something which is highly contentious, and you should keep an eye out for this case, where this will have a huge repercussion for other SCP cases. Now, when I was talking about FRAND in the previous cases, the plaintiff, has to file, comparable licensing agreement. And since those agreements contain highly confidential information, what the plaintiff basically says is that let's set up a confidentiality club. In that confidentiality club, we'll have certain members from the plaintiff side, certain members from the defendant side. But these will be exclusively external lawyers and external experts. And only these members of the confidentiality club will be able to have access to the confidential documents, which is the license agreements in this case. So in all the previous cases, we've seen how the judges usually went, were the judges used to constitute a confidentiality club, but they used to keep the members of the confidentiality club strictly to external lawyers and external experts. In this case, however, Justice Harishankar went the other way. Justice Harishankar said that, okay, so in this case, Justice Harishankar basically said that members of the defendant should also be included in the confidentiality club. So basically, Justice Harishankar diverted from the jurisprudence which was set by right now. The confidentiality club was also, mentioned in the Delhi High Court rules. It was kind of followed by all the courts until now in this case. This is a case which is currently pending before the Honorable Supreme Court now. This has been challenged. Whether the issue of whether inclusion of defendants should be a part of the confidentiality club is something which is, pending before the Supreme Court, and this is a must watch for all people who are interested in this field. So this brings an end to, I've actually kind of lost my voice also. This brings an end to my session right here. I hope,
Thank you so much. Please go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to end by saying I hope you all enjoyed the session, and I hope it was worthwhile. You learned something new. I'm open to questions right now. I'll give it to my panelists. Yes.
Thank you, Nikhil. I think we have one of that. Yeah, Kalyana, please, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Nikhil, there are a few questions in the Q&A box. If you can check those questions, and if you would like to answer those questions. In the Q&A box, there are a few questions for you, Nikhil. Nikhil, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Right. So the first question is, if tomorrow government defines these terms, can Section 66A be again held valid? Well, actually, so now this is an exercise which the government will have to do. So in Section 66A, what was being prohibited? So Section 66A basically said that you can be criminally liable if, you write something on an electronic media, which is, can be, let's go to the Section 66A. Just give me 1 second. So Section 66A said that if it's, causing annoyance, inconvenience, danger, insult, injury, hatred, or ill will. The reason why this was scraped off is not because these terms were not defined. The reason it was scraped off was because these terms were outside the ambit of Article 19(2). So what the court basically said that it's such a wide, so arbitrary. What is inconvenience? What is ill will? If I find something ill will might not what the other person find ill will. So if I write on Facebook saying that, I don't agree with the policy come out by Modi, I mean, the government can say that this is causing ill will. So these terms were not well delineated, were not well defined, and they were outside the ambit of Article 19(2). Now, Article 19 says that there can be a reasonable restriction on my freedom of speech, provided it's defamatory or provided it's, against morality, etc., etc. But Section 66 terms in Section 66 were not within the ambit of Article 19(2), they're outside, and hence it was scraped off. I hope I was able to answer your question. So coming to the second question, okay, so somebody's asked me, could you elaborate a little bit on anti-suit injunction talked in the interdigital case? Okay, so this is an interesting question. So interdigital case is still pending right now. What really had happened was, and I can, so interdigital had filed a suit against Xiaomi before the Delhi High Court. The suit was for infringement of patents. What happened subsequently was Xiaomi filed a case before the Chinese court, and they filed a case seeking for determination of grant. They also said that the suit which is happening in India right now should be injuncted, and only the Chinese court should take in charge of the future litigation. I mean, they basically said that the interdigital should not be allowed to continue with this suit in India, and only the Chinese court should look into this aspect. An anti-suit injunction application was filed by Interdigital before the Delhi High Court, basically saying injuncting Xiaomi from continuing prosecuting their application before the Chinese court, and basically asking the Delhi High Court to take in charge of the matter. So it's a little confusing for people who don't really know about the anti-suit injunction. This was a really important case because it kind of coined, very this beautiful written judgment by Justice Hari Shankar. Actually, he went on to say that he went on to injunct Xiaomi. He came out with an anti-suit injunction order saying that Xiaomi cannot file an anti-suit injunction before the Chinese court, and Xiaomi should present and appear before the Delhi High Court, and the court should continue with the case which is happening before the Delhi High Court. So it can't be the case, like if there are two parties, right? And and so for instance, A and B. A files a case against B. B goes to another country and says that you pass an injunction against them to not prosecute the case in India. So this case kind of says that you are not allowed to do that. I mean, no court in other country can tell Indian courts of not to prosecute any case which is pending before them. So this was the case which was filed before in India right now. Justice Harishankar came out with a very beautiful judgment. You should all read it. It actually expounds the theory on anti-suit injunction really well. So I hope I was able to answer your question, Pallavi. So somebody has asked me what are my views on the copyrightability of open source software in India. I mean, I think we've kind of gone beyond our time. So I just want to ask if we still have time.
Yes, Nikhil, carry on. I mean, okay. We don't have to restrict. It's okay. For learning, it's allowed.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So I have 3 other questions. So I'll start with the first one. So somebody has asked me, what about the first copy or second copy of the original product which is sold in the market? Does this really misrepresent the original product and make consumers to believe it was the original product? Can this lead to inadequate protection against the privacy of the original owner? So I'm not really sure if this question is being alluded to which case. So maybe if the person who has written this question can come back to me and let me know which case he's referring to, I can probably answer better. So coming to, right. I mean, I think that person is here.
Sir, I am audible, sir?
Yeah, you are.
Sir, it is not depend upon any case, sir. I just thought of what will be the answer for this, so I asked.
I mean, are you talking about copyright, or are you talking about patent, or are you talking about...
No, I'm talking about the copyright, sir.
Okay. Okay, what about the first copy? This is treating misunderstanding. I mean, in a copyright case, I'm not really sure if I answered your question. So you're saying that if somebody has a copyright over like a book or something, what will happen if a second copy of the original product is sold in the market? Is that the question?
Sir, actually, there was some original product for the Adidas, but the same copy, first hand copy or second hand copy is manipulated, like some changes in that name, and it was sold in the market, believing
right.
by customers believing that it was the original product, by saying also like it was a first hand copy of the product, so you can buy it. It was like that. So in that way, is this really affects the original owner profit of the original owner? It was my questions.
All right. So in this is a clear case of infringement. So if somebody is pawning off an Adidas shoe or making changes and trying to sell it off as an Adidas shoe, so Adidas will have certain IP which through which they'll protect their products. So for instance, this can be a case of trademark case. This can be a case of design infringement. So Adidas will have certain design protection over their shoes. They'll have, if somebody is using the mark Adidas, Adidas can sue them for trademark. Adidas will also have certain copyright. You can have copyright over the packaging. You can have different aspects which you can protect. So Adidas can protect their IP in a certain ways in this scenario. So even if there's somebody who is trying to try to rip off an Adidas shoe or make changes to Adidas shoe and sell it off as an Adidas shoe, I mean, this is a clear case of infringement. You can't really do that. So, I mean, I hope this was your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was clear.
All right. Thank you. So, okay. So one other last question is, what are your views on the copyrightability of open source software in India? So this is a very interesting question. So open source software in India is basically, so let's talk about software in India first. So if you have a software there, if you are the original of that software, there are two things that you can do. One is you can try and getting a patent on it, but getting a patent on a software is next to impossible. We have Section 3K of the Patent Act, which basically says that algorithm per se is not patentable. We also have the CRI guidelines, the Computer Related Invention Guidelines, which basically says that, algorithm per se or a software code per se is not patentable. You need to have something more. What is that something more? It's called technical effect. So basically, if you're filing a patent for a software, you have to show that there is an integration with hardware, one, and two, that integration with hardware causes a technical effect. So you have to show that, there's something more than just an algorithm which is written on paper. You have to show that there's a technical effect achieved when it runs on that hardware. So to do these two things, you have to get for a patent. Recently, we have seen getting a patent on a software or a code or an object code or a source code. It's very, very difficult. The patent office usually looks at these applications and they raises so many objections under Section 3K. So the easiest what one can do is you can get a copyright protection over a software code. But getting a copyright protection over a software code, you'll have to disclose your software code to the patent office. What many companies don't want to do is keep their software code as a trade secret, because they don't want to disclose their software code to other people, because other people can then just copy or tweak or make amends in your software code. So what some people do is they have open source software. You basically have sites where you can just put your software, and you're putting in your software out there saying that anybody who wants to use that software can use it. So once you use you have your corporate over. Once you have your software in India and you put it on these websites for anybody else to use it, you can either have maybe like a user information saying that, okay, if somebody is using it, you have to take a license from me, or you can give it free of cost. So that's open source software. You're basically saying that, okay, I'm not going to charge anything for my software. This is free of charge. You can use it. But sometimes what they do is they put it out on the internet and they say that, okay, anybody who wants to use and copy my software can use it, but they have to take a license from me because I have a copyright over this software code. So there are two ways which one can go about it. I hope I was able to answer your question, Nimisha.
Danish, ask your question.
Thank you, Nikhil. I think, Danish, you can please unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Okay, Nikhil, this question is related to the new intermediary guidelines. So as you have rightly pointed out that when this Shriya single judgment came, where the intermediaries are not supposed to take action on the legal notices sent by the brand owners. They need to file the cases in the court, and on the basis of the order of the court, they react. But now, as per the new intermediary guidelines, that in case if the brand owners are sending notices to the intermediaries, now what do you think that how they will react on that? Because sometimes these brand owners make wrong claim. They also ask to take down the descriptive marks from the platforms. Sometimes they ask for the device marks to take down. So I mean to say the intermediaries are not in a position to decide whether the claim is right or wrong. So how they would be able to take action on it? What are your views on that?
That's a very interesting question, Danish. So, so you've very rightly pointed out, I mean, this is definitely a point of contention. But, if you read the new IT rules, so IT rules says that in Section 3, they have come out with certain points where they say that if a user, files a complaint with a social intermediary, a social intermediary is only required to look at that, provided it's under, like it's, for instance, if it's defamatory, if it's against the morality, integrity, sovereignty of India, if it's, against interest of child, if it's pornography. So all these things are already defined. So if a user sees like a pornography on Facebook, then it can send and notice to the grievance officer of Facebook saying that I've come across this illegality content on your platform and I request you to remove it. When it comes to your question, so when it comes to if I come across like somebody using my mark on
The intellectual
Facebook
property
platform,
rights. Yeah.
Right. So
Yes.
if I think the recourse, I mean, you're right. I mean, a lot of these social media intermediaries can't be, arbiters of what is right or what is wrong, whether somebody is infringing or not. I mean, the only recourse I see is you can probably send a notice to social media intermediaries saying that somebody is using my mark on your platform and I request you to remove it. But I think in my experience, people usually either if they write a notice to social media intermediaries and if they do not get a response, they just go to a court and file a case that such and such social media intermediary, my mark was being infringed and was used on such and such platforms. Whether it comes to can a social media intermediary be held liable for if somebody else is using mark, I don't think so, because as I said, Section 3 only points out certain aspects which you have to look into. Whether somebody is using somebody else's IP on a social media platform is not necessarily will come under Section 3. And I don't think so a social media intermediary can be held liable. The only recourse I feel like is you have to go to court and say that your mark has been infringed on a social media intermediary platform.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
I think we're done with the questions here. Thank you all. Thank you all the participants, and thank you so much, Nikhil, for the most informative and engaging workshop on IPR cases. I'm sure it's a good learning experience for all our participants. Thank you again, Nikhil, for coming over to EBC Learning and delivering a very interesting webinar. Thank you once again. All our webinars are available on YouTube, and we have been doing a series of them, so do check them out. In case you are not subscribed to EBC Learning, I would say join us now, join us today. So that's all for today, everyone. Hope you all had a great learning experience. Have a lovely evening ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anshul. Thank you, everyone.
Nikhil, a lot of people are asking for your PPT. So we want to share it, I mean, because it's your intellectual property.
Of course. I mean, yeah, of course I can share my PPT. I can just share it with you, I guess.
So if you can just share it in this chat box itself, I think it would be more convenient so people can simply download it from here. I'll also say at the same time, I'll request all attendees to please check out ebclearning.com. There are a lot of amazing courses there, and they're there for every one of you. It's not just for the law students, but also for the practitioners and for everyone from various different types of interest groups. So I'll urge once again to just log on to ebclearning.com, browse our courses, try to take the free trial and subscribe to the courses.
I'm not sure how to put my PPT in the chat box. Is there a way I can share my PPT with everyone?
Okay, I think it's shared with me, and I think I will be able to email the, because we have received the invites and we have the emails of the people who have joined here. So I think we will email to the people. So I think that's what I'll do. So, all right. So Sanjana and everyone else who's been requesting PPT will be sending it to you. Okay, thank you. Let's conclude. Or
that's about it. Thank you so much. Thank you
That's
all the participants here. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you, Nikhil. Once again, it was an amazing session. Thank you so much.